How to experience unbound consciousness. Now, when I say experience unbound consciousness, you can experience it to such a degree or with such immersion that there is only unbound consciousness. There's no experiencer apart from it. There's no watcher state. This is a pretty significant shift in experience, or pretty significant immersion that doesn't typically happen during usual meditative states. It's usually a result of a specific or precise type of inquiry. Sometimes it might be called self-inquiry, sometimes it might be called inquiry into the nature of thoughts and consciousness. Another way of saying this is that the result of disidentifying from thoughts, if done properly, results in this experience that's completely immersive. It's immersive into itself and only itself. There's not someone apart from it experiencing it as, oh, cool, I'm experiencing consciousness, or some manager in the background thinking it's the one doing the meditating, or the watcher watching this experience, or the sense of the one recording the experience to relate it later to ourselves or to someone else or to our journal. None of those elements are there when we're talking about unbound consciousness or true disidentification from thoughts. So in this video, I just want to offer a very simple, two-step direct approach. Here we go. So the first step, and I have many videos on this in the inquiry section, in the approaching awakening section, so you can get the flavor of it from other videos. But I'll state it simply here. The first step is to disidentify from thoughts by recognizing thoughts as such. So you could say this is mindfulness practice, this is becoming present, and so forth. In the sort of pop culture, that's the way we would describe it. But it's not too hard to become aware of one thought, or to realize that a certain perception you had at a given moment is a thought. It's a very different thing to get into a process right now, a process of inquiry, a precise investigation into the nature of thought itself, such that you're not re-identifying with thoughts. You're recognizing the thoughts in real time, essentially. That there's just one thought arising here and another thought arising there. And the way to do that is just become aware of whatever thought is catching your attention right now. What are you thinking? And it might be anything. Could be, I understand what's being said here. Oh, I've already done this. Or I don't understand it. Could be, I do this all the time, but I get stuck. Could be, I don't believe in spirituality and consciousness. This is all much mumbo jumbo. Could be, my butt itches. Could be, my dog's chewing on a Q-tip across the room. That happens to be the case here. Could be anything, right? So just notice what the mind is saying right now in your own experience. It's just authenticity, right? And if it's difficult to even start here, and that is the case for some people, it's as if the mind identification is so continuous they don't realize they're thinking. Just ask yourself, well, what's the quality of experience in my mind right now? Do I hear my own voice when I go quiet? Do I hear a narrative? Am I talking to myself in my mind? Do I have an image in my mind? A mental image that's not what I'm actually looking at? Like what I was doing 10 minutes ago, or imagining what I'm going to do when I'm done watching this video? That's thought. So just become aware of the quality of the experience in your mind. Then you'll start to become aware of thoughts singularly. Each perception as it arises. Oh, there's a thought that says things are getting quiet. And then you just pause, right? Don't grab the next thought by analyzing. Because often, once we start to do this, we'll start to analyze. Oh, wow. Oh, I see how this works. So when okay, there's another thought. Yeah? So the analysis thoughts will start. Notice, oh, that's another thought. It gets quiet. But keep attention there. You're not a watcher. You're just alert. What comes next? A thought might say, oh, I'm hungry. Whatever. The mind might wander. You might notice something in the belly. It says, oh, there's something tells me I should eat breakfast. Okay, there's a thought. I should eat breakfast. Now what? Might be an emotion quality. Well, every time I quiet my mind, I get depressed, or I get sad again, or I think about the thing I don't want to think about, right? Kind of a fear thought almost. A thought that says if you get too quiet in the mind, fear might come. You may start thinking about the thing you don't want to think about. It's another thought. The thought is, if I get too quiet, I'll start thinking about something uncomfortable. Okay, there's one thought. Now what? What comes next? What is the next thing your mind produces? That's it. But be alert, precise, relaxed of mind, meaning don't grasp and push and pull on thoughts, because the grasping, pushing, and pulling is sort of the feeling of thinking. It's the feeling of being the thinker. And if you feel that, there's probably a lot of thoughts ongoing that you're identified with. So instead, just relax. Open the aperture of attention in the mind. Be open to any thought that arises, whether it's a thought in your own voice, whether it's a sound, whether it's a thought stated in your own voice, some wondering, some analysis about this process, taking notes about how you're doing, how you're feeling, how trippy it is, how boring it is. Those are thoughts. Just be alert. That's it. Okay? And you can practice this way for quite some time. The mind will get calm. You'll notice gaps. Just wait till one thought ends and notice the gap until the next thought starts. There's a gap. There's a moment where you were not thinking, or there was just no thoughts. It's fine. It happens a lot, but we don't become aware of it usually. We totally overlook it. So that's the first part. That's step one. Get good at that. Get good enough at that to where you're reasonably confident that you can sit there and actually notice thoughts without becoming identified with thoughts. That's the key. Usually there's a calmness of mind that comes with it, or may not. And you don't have to think about while this is happening, oh, what would step two? Because that's another thought, right? Don't anticipate anything. Okay? Now, if this doesn't just lead you into a place of complete dropping away of everything, which it could easily if you let go, then step two is the next step. And step two is really a subtle refinement of what I described already, with a little bit of a different nature of how you move attention, let's say. And that is, some people, but not all people, will very naturally, as they go through that first phase, that first step, will feel as if they're making distance from thoughts. Like you're pushing the object out there, like the object of thought. Oh, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought. You're like pushing away experience somehow, or stepping back from experience. It's okay if that seems like it's happening. It's totally fine. The mind can still get quiet. There can feel as if there's this sort of watcher state, something like that. A subjectification, if you've read my book, that's how I describe it. And that's okay. That often occurs when you get better at that first step. When you really are pretty alert and precise in noticing thoughts. You're not just getting bound into thought train again and again. But there can still be this sense of holding back, watching thoughts float across the sky, something like that, or across the mental landscape. Or just you feel some distance, right? You feel a little disassociation. So that's when step two comes in. Step two is, I want you to move toward the thought. Move toward the thought substance, the thought experience, right? So if you're standing back from a thought, and a thought says, whatever it says, a narrative, right? Oh, I'm doing a great job meditating, whatever it says. What the hell is that made out of? Isn't it kind of weird that you're having an internal experience and there's something like called you in there, and it's like looking across some mental room and it sees a thought that says blah, blah, blah in the voice that I don't even know where that voice is coming from? Where the hell is that coming from? What is it? Who is it? What is its quality? What's the quality of the distance between me, the watcher, and the thought that I'm watching? Does one start somewhere and end somewhere? Where do they meet? So I want you to like investigate that directly, right? That's the whole point. What's the sensation of that, the substance of that? You got to kind of move toward the thought. So I use this analogy a lot. Like when you're sitting in a movie theater and the screen is, portraying a movie, a story, whatever, and you're just engulfed in the movie. You forget that you're in the theater, right? So mindfulness is like, oh, I'm in a theater. Okay, that's right. But you're still interested in the story. Self-inquiry is like, oh, that's a character, that's a red shirt. You're sort of starting to see the components of the story, and you're not binding into the story anymore. You're seeing it as a collection of movements on a screen. You realize that's not actually happening up there. And then as you become better at it, it's like you're moving closer to the screen until it starts to you start to realize that you can't even believe the story anymore. It's clearly not actually what's happening in the world. The world is out here, and that's a screen on the movie theater wall. You start to see the mind that way. You're like, oh wow, thoughts. Why was I so bound up in thoughts and past and future, right? You're moving toward that movie screen, seeing that it's just a movement of colors and shapes and whatever it is, right? So what I'm talking about here is once you disidentify it, you really see that that's just a collection of essentially symbols. Thoughts are symbols representing something that may or may not be there, past, future, events, people, objects, selves, right? Once you see that they're symbols and you're not entangled in the symbols such that you feel like you're in that movie line, that storyline, that's great. So now what I want you to do is become curious. Well, what the heck is the nature of that light on the screen, right? Move up to the screen. Like even the red and blue and the lines and shapes between the people and the tree and the ground on the movie screen will blur out when you get close enough. And when you get really close, it's just light. You may not even be able to tell the difference between colors, right? If you're close enough to that screen, or even better, you get up to the screen and then you go, wait a minute, what's the source of this light? And you turn around and look right into the light, and then there's nothing but light. That's what it feels like to move toward thought, to move toward after the first step. That you have to have that down to where you're not identifying, because what I'm saying now can just become another thought, right? You can imagine it, you can think about it, you can analyze, conceptualize it. I don't want you to do any of that. You really have to get to the point where the mind is pretty quiet and there's not a lot of thoughts arising. And then when one does, it's almost such a peculiar thing that you want to like move toward it. So the danger of this is I can tell you this and you'll imagine moving towards it. I don't want you to imagine it. I want you to actually see if you can move toward it. See if you can come in contact with it. And this is where self-inquiry is kind of crossing over with this approach. And that is, what's the sense of the seer? What's the sense of the conscious one? How is that different than the thought stuff itself? Where's the distance? How could there be distance? When you're up there and you're looking at the movie screen and it's just light. And you turn around the projector and it's just light. It's like the screen light, the projector light. It's all the same light, right? Don't conclude that I am the light, but just keep looking at the light. You're looking from the light. You're looking at the light. You're in the light. The light is the thought. The light is the consciousness. The light is the ability to be conscious of. The light is the conscious one. There's no you in it. There's no separate you. There's no separate objects. There's only consciousness. There's only light. Okay. Now, again, I do recommend doing it in a kind of two-step approach, because if you try to mix those steps together, this is such subtle stuff, it's easy to confuse yourself or start thinking about it or analyzing it. But I think if you do each of those steps and rewatch this video, it may be helpful and you'll get the sense of what I'm talking about, what I'm telling you to do. You could say the first step has a more of a disintegrative feeling, or maybe masculine, expansive. The second step is a more integrating or feminine movement, or not contracted, but intimate. But those are just flavors. They're flavors of experience. At some point, when it all comes together, it's like they're the same. The expansion and contraction are not different. The expansion and intimacy are not different. The disintegration and integration in consciousness are not different. Then you see the quality of consciousness, because it can integrate and disintegrate simultaneously. That's why it can create everything, at least all the forms that you perceive as the world, the self, the body, the mind, the past, the future, problems, solutions, knowledge, all of it. Pure consciousness without any of that. All of it is the same. But concluding that does you no good. You have to take those steps. So let me know if that was helpful.